Hello everyone, welcome to our next Vigor map tutorial, and today we are covering Dverg Forest, or Dverg Forest, not sure how you pronounce it. Dverg is a large map with a lobby of 8 to 12 players. Like the name implies, it is a forest set in a snowy landscape. It has two roads that cross each other in the middle, with a small settlement and a bridge to cross the river cutting the map in half vertically. I think this is a good map for newer players and it's quite friendly for new players to play on, so stick around for the whole video and you'll understand why that's my opinion. So let's get started. As always, we kick off with our points of interest overview of the map. Most of the points of interest will spawn in the center of the map, with a few exceptions of Bard and Time having the option to spawn either north or south of the map. If you have been following my series, then you can probably guess that this area will be the main playing field, but that doesn't mean you are forced to go into this hot zone. Not much to say about the points of interest otherwise. Bard and Timed are pretty straightforward and there are no special catches about them or their locations. Locked Container, however, a very tempting point of interest on this map, but in my opinion the most dangerous one to go after. It is always a bit in the open on a street, and because this is a forest there are a lot of trees where people can hide in. Definitely use the flashbang trick here to open the container, because trying to pick the locks makes you very exposed and you want to avoid that. Especially if the container spawns on the bridge, a lot of times people won't even go for the container because you are so exposed there, even if you're on the inside to grab its contents. Because the map is a bit clustered and it's hard to see where all the points of interest spawn, I put in a little zoom to show you in detail where all the points of interest can spawn. It's a bit divided on the left side and the right side of the river, so the hot zones will be dependent a bit on where the points of interest spawn. Next up is the loot distribution on this map. As you can see, the main playing field is also the main looting area, but this map also allows you to gather loot outside of this area as well. All of the small spots that have been marked will have some variations of resource to collect. Cars and trucks on this map are particularly interesting. Before the loot redistribution of update 12, you could collect 6 to 8 fuel per car in an unboosted lobby. They nerfed that down to 2 to 3 fuel, but it's still pretty consistent to get it here. Fuel and electronics are plentiful on this map, but looting cars is always a risk. There are no locked exits, so you don't need to collect anything specific to open an exit here. So loot cars at your own risk, but this is one of the few maps that I would say it's allowed to loot cars, but only if you are willing to take the risk or if you have eliminated any potential threats first. I marked the cars in yellow on this map. Update 12's loot redistribution has also made this a map where you can find just about anything in decent amounts, even some fertilizer and chemicals. Chemicals I marked with a blue star on this map because I know how precious they are for our shelters. There are other locations where you will find chemicals, mostly spread out along the river or inside the buildings, but that one location always has a big bunch of them. In the main playing field it's mostly the cars and buildings that will be interesting. Outside of that it will be scattered locations such as the Red Barn North or the Yellow House South. A couple of polluted dumps around the forest that will also give you some resources. If you are a careful looter or a very new player who is just trying to survive encounters, looting 2 of these areas could actually give you enough to head for an exit right away. It won't give you the highest loot per encounter, but it will be enough to get you along on your shelter. Interesting on this map is the hidden caches. On all of the snow maps the locations are a lot easier to find because they will either be a black spot in the snow or they will have a different tint of white, a more icy looking white that marks the location of the cache itself. Because it's easier to find, you will also find it a lot quicker and you will expose yourself less trying to look around for it. Moving on to the spawning locations on this map. Usual disclaimer, these may not be all the exact spawning locations, but I did notice that there are not a lot of variations on Dverg when it comes to spawning. So in a full lobby of 12, I think that every one of these locations will spawn a player, which means that you are very close to a potential conflict at the start of the encounter. Definitely keep a mental note on these so you know where to go or where not to go. I think this is going to be one of the easier maps to remember all the spawns on. 8 to 10 player lobbies means that you will not per se have anybody close by, but you won't know that until you hit signals or use other means to determine player locations. My tip on comm stations from my other tutorial does come quite in handy on this map. There is usually a comm station north and south of the map, so if those get hit, then you have a good idea of where people are. If you haven't seen my tutorial on that, I will leave a link in the comments for you. Signals! Always an important part of these tutorials. There are 7 potential spawning locations for signals, which may sound like a lot, but this is a big map. We have 2 spawns in the middle of the playing field on the east side, near the blue house and near the shed a bit further up, and we have 2 on the west side of the playing field, one near the red house and one up the hill on the overlook. All 4 of these are important if you want to gain some control over this area. The ones on the east are quite easy to control if you stay on the east side. The ones on the west a bit harder because the one on the overlook is not that easy to go back and forth to all the time, but definitely an important one for the middle area as well. Then we have one south on the farm and 2 north, one at the shed in the hills and one at the red barn. The one south is only good if you get the airdrop in that area and early on to secure that specific area. More so if a point of interest spawns here. Once you looted the area, there's no real reason to stay there and signals becomes obsolete. Sometimes it can be useful if you want to venture forward into the playing field, get a feel for how hot the areas are, but not really to pinpoint other outlanders. The one north at the shed, Bard can also spawn at the same location, but chances of that are on the low side. This one, just like the one south, is good to check the map and see how hot the areas are before pushing into the main playing field. It looks like it's closer to the middle, but you have to cross the river or follow the river to get to the middle, which takes some time actually. The one at the old barn is just like the one south. It's only useful if you get the airdrop in that area or if you want to check your exits. No point of interest ever spawns up here. So all 3 of these are a bit neutral to the playing field, but not completely obsolete. If someone keeps using signals in one of these locations, even late game, then it may be wise to avoid exits that are close to it so you don't get cut off. On the other hand, you can always use it yourself to check which exits are safe. Just watch out for signal campers. Yes, people also camp at signals sometimes. So we've covered the layout of the map a bit and it's time to discuss the dynamics. It's pretty straightforward, but this map is actually divided in smaller areas or zones. The center of the map being the main playing field, with all the points of interest concentrated there and also the best looting areas. Around the main playing field are smaller loot hubs where you can go from location to gather resources without actually going near a point of interest, and thus avoiding hot zones a bit. However, this map also provides a chance for a point of interest to spawn away from the center, and that gives newer players a chance to push on a point of interest without having the full force of the lobby threatening on them. The splitting of the map also happens on a physical level because the river cuts it down in the middle. Crossing the river is a dangerous action. Anybody watching the river will see you crossing and you can't go in the water to cross it. All of the snow maps will give you hypothermia if you are in the water for more than a few seconds. This will diminish your health even when you are no longer in the water. So there are only a few good spots where you can cross the river by jumping from rock to rock or crossing at a bridge. Crossing at a bridge is safer, but will still leave you exposed, especially the car bridge in the middle of the map. If you do happen to get into the water, always make sure that the other side of the shore is accessible, because some areas have an elevated level and you won't be able to get out of the water. Because the river splits the map, some players tend to stay on one side of it. This also divides the main playing field into 2 smaller areas, making it a bit harder to get full control of it, even when signal spawns there. I have found alarm traps and jammers to be especially helpful when venturing into the main playing field here. Setting a couple up at the bridge always gives you a heads up when somebody is crossing it. The rest of the areas are not split by any real limitations other than having to cross through the main playing field and the time or distance that it takes to travel from one location to another. This is why I find Dverg to be a friendly map for newer players. It is divided into smaller parts and the player can choose how far they want to go to get loot and how much risk they want to take. The trees also give you a lot of cover and make it easier to escape conflicts if you want to avoid them. You will also most likely be encountering people throughout the entire game time, because players tend to stay as long as they can here to collect as much loot as possible. But that can come back and bite you if you are not careful. And speaking of other players, we have an overview of our hot zones here. Typical hot zones early game are the yellow house to the south. Usually 2 or 3 players will come together there very early. The barn all the way north, another spot where 2 or 3 players can come together depending on where everybody tries to go. The little shed north, especially if a point of interest or signal spawns there. Then usually the hot zone from the barn shifts to that area, and 2 to 5 people can actually show up there. The middle area, especially the west side, can lead to early conflicts, but the whole main playing field will be a hot zone throughout the encounter. And the little shed to the east of the main playing field can also become an early conflict. I put the spawn points on the hot zone maps this time to give you a better idea where other players are coming from. Again, my skills are limited to paint, so apologies for the quality of these images. But here you have a clear view of where people spawn and where the most logical places that they will be going to. This is of course not always 100% true. Every player has its free will and can go wherever they want to go. But from a logical perspective, this is where most players will go right after they spawn. And we have come to the final part of the video, as always, the exits. Dverg has plenty of exits, 6 in total, and none of them are locked. That gives players plenty of options to choose an exit. They are, however, all far from the playing field, so do not underestimate how long it takes to get to an exit on this map. Even the 2 east and west of the playing field that seem close by are not that quickly reached, especially with the new radiation system. So exit on time. If an exit camper is nearby, then you can always try to reach another exit, but if radiation has already started, chances of reaching a second exit are not that good. Caffeine is definitely your friend on this map, be it early game or late game to get to an exit. And also don't get cocky in your last moments of the game. Just because radiation has already started does not mean you are alone. I have had plenty of games where people give away their location at the end of the game, and then I know exactly which exit they will go to because they have no other option left. You become a very easy kill in that situation. So always be careful. You are also most likely to be cut off before an exit than at the exit itself, because most of the exits are pretty open and exposed. All of the exits are a bit mirrored from each other, that's why I use different colors this time, not to show you which ones are good or bad, because they're all equally good in my opinion, but to show you which ones are a bit mirrored. The one north and south are open and exposed, pretty straightforward. The one to the southwest and northeast are both at the end of the road and go a little bit uphill, but fairly easy to exit on. The northwest and southeast one are both in mountain territory with some forest in front of it. I think these 2 are the least used because there is no direct looting area around it. The one southeast is probably the closest exit to the main playing field, but you have to go through some rocky territory to get it, and it's actually easy to get lost to that one. The exit to the north has 4 cars. If you loot the first one, then go back out of the timer area, you can go back in and loot another 2 cars before exiting. Getting all 4 cars is pretty hard, if not impossible, so just focus on getting 3 cars to boost that loot when you exit. And I think that covers everything for the exits on this map. So to recap, we have a low count of spawning points, meaning that you should always know where everybody is. All of the loot and points of interest are concentrated in the middle, as usual, but there is also plenty of loot around the map. Know where the hot zones are, which you should if you know all the spawns. And as always, exit in time and don't give away your position when you're heading to an exit. I think that covers everything here. If you have any ideas or comments, feel free to post them below the video. Any feedback is always appreciated. Hope you enjoyed this tutorial, hope it's helpful to get you around the map a bit better. As always, thank you for watching and I hope to see you guys all next video. Bye!